Today we're going to go to Milford Sound, Dusky Sound and Doubtful Sound. Milford Sound is by far the most spectacular. It's also the most difficult one to get into, so fingers crossed for an entrance to all of these sounds. You're going to love them, they are fantastic.
Enter quite early, and the plan is to go into 3 fjords, starting from Milford, which I always think is the most spectacular one because it's also the narrowest one and with the tallest peak.
It's a fairly common sort of a confusion where we talk about Milford Sound and Doubtful Sound and then refer to the whole lot as Fiordland. The difference between the two is simply that a sound is a river-formed valley which is backfilled with water, whereas a fjord is ice-carved. And these glacial carved valleys are definitely U-shaped and they are technically fjords. Misnamed in the early days, most of the visitors to this part of the country were from the British Isles, where similar valleys are in fact sounds, they're river-formed sounds. So they tended to name them sounds rather than fjords, but technically they are ice-carved fjords.
We will go into Milford Sound and come out Milford Sound by doing a U-turn deep in the sound. It's not a very long sound, but it's got the most spectacular scenery, waterfalls. You can see glaciers on a clear day, and lots and lots of streams coming down into the sound.
Yeah, you have to plan it very carefully because, of course, especially into a couple of the points in 2 of the fjords are very, as you say, quite narrow. So one of these narrow passages actually is in an alteration. So when you have come in, it's almost a bend, almost a 90-degree bend. So you actually have to alter the ship in the middle of the fjords. Of course, when you alter the vessel, you have to consider that you have like a side drift as well. So the alteration has to be done at the right time, at the right moment, at the right speed, just to make sure you always remain in the safety parameter throughout the fjord. So it's a careful navigation. It's not like being up in the open sea with 4,000 meters under the keel.
So the other sounds we're going into, both Doubtful Sound and Dusky Sound, and the other sounds that get you in and out of there, are not as spectacular in terms of sheer cliff sides as Milford, but they have a lot of history.
There is a lot of history there, yeah. The first of the people through were the early Māori, of course, and for the most part they were in there because they were having trouble with their neighbours over the hill. They were in there looking for refuge or attacking or fighting. There was not a lot of permanent settlement in that area, but Captain Cook came through. He's very, very big in Fiordland and Dusky in particular. He sailed through with the Endeavour in 1770, Doubtful Harbour he named. He didn't name any of the fjords as sounds. It's a misnomer that he did. He named Doubtful Harbour because he could see from offshore that it was a very narrow entrance and the easterly wind was rare, so he suspected that it would ever be doubtful, no good as a harbour. Dusky Bay he saw when he came through. He came up from the ice. They'd been down exploring, looking for the great southern continent. They felt at that stage that there had to be a big landmass down south to balance the big one up north, and they'd been looking for that. They hadn't found it. He'd been way down amongst the ice. He'd given up. He set sail after 117 days at sea, dead reckoning, and he turned up at Dusky Bay, which he'd named on his way through. It was gazetted as a national park in 1952, and it covers 3.25 million acres, so it's a large area of land. The national park boundary finishes at the high tide line. Although we're travelling in the fjords and they are considered part of the national park, technically they are not. But they have the same protection. There's a Marine Mammal Protection Act, a Fiordland Act, that protects all the marine life and everything in the fjords. So yeah, 1952. The scale, I think, and the remoteness, the fact that it's one of the few places in the world now where you can come cruising through on a ship like this. On the whole trip right down the coast we saw 2 boats, and on that trip right through from the entrance to Milford out to the bottom of Preservation Inlet, and that's relatively typical. There's just nobody here, nothing here, and it's the remoteness, the beauty of the scenery, and the fact that it is untouched. It gives you a feeling of awe.
Then the other 2 fjords, both Thompson and Dusky, I think that over there the vegetation is what actually captures you most, because it's like this rainforest kind of style. These colors are, and of course from this side when we pass by with the ship, you can actually, because we are so close, you can detailedly see the trees, you can see the nature, and that is what captures most on the other fjords. Whilst Milford is the highest rock that actually capture yourself.
Particularly a lot of nature now. That the park ranger that comes on board and gives a commentary knows every animal almost by name, you know, so they are fantastic. And they'll tell you the history of the bird life. I mean, there's been extinct species found in these areas. There are lots of species that are threatened with extinction, so there's just a huge amount of natural history and restoration work going on.
Once again, getting back to Cook, when he sailed up the coast he commented on the fact he could hear the bird life 3 miles offshore. The country was just alive with native birds. We don't have any native mammals.